There's always a story flickering beneath the surface of daily life. A current that isn't visible to anyone scanning for answers in the familiar. For a long time, reality offered only its outer shell, a version of events painted with the same brush that everyone accepts without question. But tonight, something subtle twists the ordinary into something that refuses to stay hidden. While people lose themselves in capturing perfect images of the moon, chasing a moment that will be swept away with the next morning, the real event slips quietly through the background. Can a world so focused on the spectacle ever catch what truly lingers behind the curtain? It's almost like the truth wears a mask, and most eyes never even notice the faint movement underneath. If you find value in these quiet explorations, feel free to subscribe and tap the like button. Each gesture helps this space reach others navigating their own silent awakenings. What's unfolding now isn't about clarity or closure, it's about a silent unveiling, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks but with a quiet shift in the atmosphere. The standard explanation for these cycles has always been that they mark an ending, a wrapping up of loose threads. Yet, what if endings are just signposts, markers for something subtler at work? Perhaps the real threshold isn't about finishing, but about crossing into a space that tests what has been quietly growing inside. Imagine the recent turning point, the last season, not as a gentle reset but as a kind of doorway. What if this particular night isn't the destination, but the silent judge of everything carried through that portal? At times like this, have the patterns of the past ever really ended, or are they quietly waiting for the next opportunity to be seen? The notion that the turning of a season brings only fresh dreams and gentle resets misses the larger undercurrent. While many settle for the comfort of fleeting relief, what really stirs beneath is not a gift but a rehearsal. The sensation of heaviness lifting isn't the prize, it's the rehearsal for a much larger performance. What follows now isn't simply a cycle on a calendar. It's the moment where everything practiced in private is suddenly called to the stage. Have those light feelings ever truly been enough, or are they merely signals for what must come next? Consequences rarely show up as punishment. Instead, they arrive as reflections, silent echoes that mimic every choice and every neglect. When the rhythms of nature circle back, they do not strike out of vengeance but act as perfectly polished glass, revealing the integrity of every intention set in motion weeks ago. Under this particular sky, the energy bends and refracts, not to burn but to see what stands resilient under pressure. Isn't it curious how life measures what's really been cultivated, not in moments of comfort, but in these rare intervals when all distractions quiet down? It's as if some new lens has been focused, observing from an angle that hadn't existed before. Everything shifts subtly, almost imperceptibly, until suddenly the old playbook no longer applies. Where once it was enough to walk quietly, now the landscape demands presence. The lights intensify, the arena widens, and the first move feels like it's already in motion, whether anyone is ready or not. Has it ever occurred that the rules only change after everyone has already entered the ring? Between two turbulent chapters, there exists a pause so precise it almost feels unnatural. A brief, clinical moment that splits the chaos of what was from the uncertainty of what's to come. This isn't a decorative mark in some cosmic planner. It's the magnifying glass held over the raw script of daily life. Instead of smoothing things out, this interval zooms in on the unsaid, suspending the world just long enough to ask. When the pace slows and every detail is exposed, what becomes undeniable in the light that refuses to soften? Isn't it strange how, in these pauses, reality seems to watch back? If the silence tonight speaks to you, or if these thoughts feel strangely familiar, subscribing and liking helps keep this conversation alive. There's more to discover, and the next insight may arrive just when it's needed most. Recently, a strange tempo seems to color the fabric of daily life. There's a sensation of stepping into the spotlight a moment before the music starts, of occupying a seat in the theater before the curtains rise. Time moves, and yet existence itself feels paused, suspended in a liminal hallway between stories. This phase serves as a kind of border crossing between tempests, an interval where nothing wraps up and nothing launches, just a delicate suspension, as if reality itself is taking a long breath and examining the flavor in the air. Has it ever occurred that moments like these are less about arrival or departure and more about what's uncovered when everything else goes still? This interval doesn't carry the peace that often precedes upheaval. It's the sharp awareness found within the eye of the cyclone, a space where calculation, not chaos, rules the moment. If the previous storms shattered old scaffolding and opened secret chambers within, then this stretch is the low hum between distant rumbles. Silence in this sense isn't a sanctuary, it's the precise moment when the most consequential moves are quietly cemented. Has silence ever felt so dense, so full of decisions that echo long after the noise returns? The current is not interested in minor choices. What hangs in the balance is the direction of the entire arc, a turn that's not up for casual tweaking tomorrow, but rather sets the default for months to come. The moon here operates as the pause in conversation before something fateful is spoken. There's an open-ended question waiting. Which version will stand up and answer the call? Whatever facet of the self emerges now, that is the one invited to shape the near future. Is it possible that a single moment of authenticity can set the compass for half a year? At this threshold, more than individual truth gets uncovered, what's hidden also steps into a broader network. Not the watchful gaze of institutions, but an intricate web of subtle perception, the collective knowing, the ancestral wisdom humming in the background, the guiding signals from beyond ordinary understanding. This cycle collects data in a way no natal chart or personal summary could describe. Instead, it feels as if the patterns and signatures of this very moment become part of a much larger equation. And isn't it a bit unsettling to wonder what gets weighed on those cosmic scales? Patterns of choice are gathered now, not just in the obvious moves but in the unnoticed intervals. Moments of hesitation, private priorities, impulses indulged or abandoned. This isn't about being measured in the broad daylight of a new month. It's a process of sorting, of quiet recalibration. Imagine a metaphysical processor, one that weighs not only what has been done but also the intention behind each step. The motivation for moving forward, the route chosen when no eyes track the journey, the small internal shifts that guide every crossroads. What gets placed on the scales, then? Isn't it worth pausing for a second to wonder how much is registered in silence, and how much in movement? Potential has already left its imprint. What matters now is the strength of the internal broadcast, the clarity of purpose that ripples out beneath all conscious performance. The current moment asks less about stated dreams and more about actual embodiment. Are the words and actions congruent, or does some hidden rehearsal still play out behind the curtain? The roles set into motion at this juncture are not simply random. Each assignment, genuine and lasting, aligns with the character revealed in the present, not with ideals professed in passing. Can anyone truly separate who they wish to be from who is actually showing up in this hour? Rather than consequence, the energy here speaks in the language of arrangement. There's no retribution, only realignment, subtle yet unmissable for anyone truly present. Ironically, those who've tried to remain unseen become the clearest in focus. That odd sensation of being observed or guided is not a phantom trace. It's the unmistakable effect of crossing into a zone where presence gets mapped, and intention can't hide. Isn't it interesting how the feeling of being watched is often dismissed, when sometimes it signals a deeper layer of participation? What unfolds is not random chance, but the unfolding of a track, a storyline locking into place, setting the foundation for the months ahead. While tradition might suggest this time is about order, striving, and calculated advancement, those are just the visible ripples. Beneath the surface, a more intricate geometry is at work. One that cares less about outward hustle and more about what's internally crystallized. It's worth asking, when was the last time structure was felt as an internal signature rather than an external demand? Under this intensified lens, the guiding force becomes almost surgical, cutting through uncertainty, bypassing excuses, operating with an exactness that borders on inhuman. This isn't about softness or sentimental review. It's about a kind of metaphysical audit. The requirements are absolute: presence, accuracy, truth. Whether the day has been messy or brilliant, this field registers only what is honest and tangible. Have you ever noticed how, under a certain kind of light, the smallest details reveal the entire story? Outcomes, not intentions, are what matter in this field of examination. When external circumstances refuse to match internal declarations, everything destabilizes. Existence can suddenly resemble a balance sheet, each row an honest reckoning of energy given and received. There's no opportunity to paint over inconsistencies or explain away shortcomings. When the sums don't resolve, equations fracture, blueprints dissolve, and facades splinter with astonishing speed. Ever wonder how quickly the truth overtakes even the most carefully constructed narratives? This moment is not about putting on a display for unseen judges. Instead, the emphasis is on tangible evidence, demonstrable, lived proof that ideals have taken root in daily experience. It's a landscape where dreams built on wishful thinking, avoidance, or spiritual shortcuts begin to fragment. Structures collapse, not out of malice, but because what's been propped up by illusion cannot survive a shift this honest. Isn't it curious how quickly life rearranges when foundations lack authenticity? Picture this process as an impartial review by the universe itself, a methodical, unemotional inventory. The current cycle has no appetite for drama or punitive measures. It simply identifies what lacks durability and quietly lets it drift away. No bargaining. No elaborate rationalizations. Anything inauthentic is pruned, whether it's a livelihood, a daily routine, a partnership, or a cherished belief. One final opportunity arrives to examine what's flimsy, and then, with surgical grace, the underlying supports are removed. Ever notice how things seem to vanish without warning when their time is up? Correction emerges as the guiding force, not vengeance. The clarity offered here can feel stark, even jarring, especially when reality has been softened by denial or hopeful projection. For now, the usual magic tricks, manifesting, scripting, envisioning, may seem to have lost their power, as if the system is temporarily offline. This isn't failure, it's a purposeful interruption. The mechanism pauses, not as punishment, but to prevent any further distortion from running unchecked. Has the stillness ever felt so cleansing? Attempts to engineer outcomes using familiar rituals or well-worn scripts meet a wall. The rituals themselves aren't faulty, it's the flavor behind them that has grown stale. The more force is applied, the less effective each tool becomes, as though intention has been filtered through a sieve that only allows what's real to pass through. In this way, the cycle acts as a guardian, blocking distortion and preventing contamination from leaking into the next chapter. Do those old affirmations still resonate, or do they sound strangely hollow now? Any wish rooted in self-doubt, competition, the need to be seen, or the urge to control the uncontrollable is summarily declined. The signals are not muted with gentleness, they are simply cut off. It's not a matter of worthiness, but rather that the requests were written in a dialect that no longer transmits. If the frequency is off, no message is delivered. Have the desires changed, or is it the channel that's been rerouted? Rather than requesting more, this moment asks for coherence. It's about embodying the sought-after reality, allowing inner alignment to lead, rather than seeking from a posture of lack. The silence is not an obstacle but a purging. All spiritual devices and self-help tools that once responded eagerly now fade into quiet, unless rooted in genuine transformation. Does this detour feel restrictive, or does it finally bring relief from the pressure to perform? Resonance becomes the new currency. The degree to which lived reality and inner truth match sets the tone for what manifests. No longer is it enough to want with intensity, one must vibrate with clarity and wholeness. Instead of chasing wishes, the inquiry turns toward the motives driving them. How many dreams have been pursued to patch an absence, to be recognized, to feel secure? When was the last time a desire fit simply because it matched the core of the self? Signals never lie. The moment reads the energy like a digital code, direct, unfiltered, exact. A sense of emptiness or disconnection isn't a sign of deficiency, but a gentle cue to pause and recalibrate. When familiar paths stop yielding results, what remains in the silence? What happens when all that's left is the unadorned echo of being? Sometimes the first glimpse of the answer arrives not in waking life, but in the language of dreams, where the moon's message can finally be received. Recently, the realm of sleep has carried an unusual charge, a sense that what's unfolding behind closed eyes is more than the mind's random play. A dream that lingers, a fragment that haunts daylight hours, a symbol that feels loaded with meaning. These aren't mere nighttime illusions. What begins in the hours before the moon's peak is more like a ripple, a soft prelude sent ahead of the event. The lunar influence doesn't simply wait for its big moment. It slips through the seams of awareness, setting the stage before the conscious mind even notices. Ever wonder if the first signs of change always come when attention is turned away? There's a common belief that cosmic cycles only make their mark when fully visible, but this sequence proves otherwise. The latest lunar movement slips through the thinnest veils, weaving its influence days ahead, especially in the in-between states when rationality goes quiet. A flash of insight at 3 a.m., a phantom voice in the darkness, a name whispered into the void. These moments act as calibrations, subtle checks before waking resistance kicks in. The moon doesn't request access, it quietly assesses what's unguarded, using the language of dream to outline the night's agenda. Does anyone else find it odd how messages slip in through the back door of awareness? When sleep offers only emptiness or stillness, a different kind of message is being sent. Silence in the nocturnal landscape isn't emptiness, it's information, a statement that something remains hidden, perhaps deliberately. Sometimes, the lunar messenger is turned away not by malice but by interference or the walls built from years of forgetting. Or perhaps there's a message so old, even the dreaming self has grown silent. The presence of the moon in these moments is quiet, attentive, waiting for the right alignment. Is it possible that the truest messages come when the world stops demanding answers? Those who remember, those who can return to a recent dream and unpack its odd symbols, surprising visitors, or persistent feelings, may find the real seed planted there. This is where the real process starts, days before the first visible sign. In fact, awakening rarely begins in daylight. It starts in the shadows, when the conscious mind sleeps. Some latent capacities rest hidden for generations, encoded deeper than personality, untouched by surface belief. These ancestral resonances linger in marrow and memory, waiting for the signal to stir. Not every inheritance arrives on schedule, or without locks. Some truths, talents, or recollections are sealed on purpose, layered beneath protective codes that were placed long before this lifetime. Entire lineages sometimes shield knowledge until it's safe to emerge, either to protect or postpone what once unsettled an earlier bearer. Now, however, this lunar cycle works like a key, jarring loose the forgotten vault. There's a sense that the process has already started for some. Do any recent flashes of memory feel strangely timed? Subtle reminders begin to surface, a song from childhood that plays in the background, an ability that seemed lost but flickers back to life, a dream in which a familiar yet distant figure delivers a phrase or a warning. These are less flashbacks than activations, signs that the cosmic lens is scanning the past for dormant material. The moon is not merely illuminating the present, it's casting a beam backward through the entire corridor of origin. If some part of the self feels oddly ancient lately, could it be a signal that an old contract is being reopened? Sometimes, a rare lunar passage reaches deep into the roots of a family line, sending a message that the hour for awakening has arrived. For some, it brings a sudden tide of emotion, fragments of forgotten stories, old wounds resurfacing, hidden strength rising from places never known to exist. For others, intuition heightens, nudges become certainty, and flashes of knowing appear without warning. Some experience an inner reckoning, a need to resolve what was inherited but never understood. Patterns woven into the nervous system, debts that can't be paid with words alone. When a sensation of ancient familiarity stirs within, it's not the mind inventing stories, it's the spirit remembering a promise made before this lifetime began. The moon, in this moment, reveals not just the mask worn today, but the archetype waiting in the wings. Many are taught to view the moon as gentle, a soft guide, a comfort in the darkness. That illusion dissolves beneath this sky. This moon is not the lullaby or the night light. It hums with electricity, alive and urgent. This cycle is marked by polarity, with the lunar field wired directly into the solar pulse, igniting a magnetic charge across the unseen circuits of the body. Rest becomes a challenge. Minds race in the small hours, a restless current demanding motion, even when logic says nothing's wrong. Has sleep ever felt so charged, or has the body ever felt so animated by forces unseen? Rather than passively reflecting, this lunar phase acts as a transmitter, an active broadcaster pulsing through consciousness and matter alike. Instead of simply illuminating the night, the moon shouts, signaling to those ready and those resistant, a clarion call impossible to ignore. What many label as anxiety or fatigue is, in reality, a struggle to process a wave of unfamiliar data, a frequency upgrade echoing through every cell. Is it anxiety, or is it the body attempting to adapt to a signal never received before? The new lunar current slices through doubt and confusion, piercing like a siren's call or a flash of daylight. Intuition no longer whispers but commands, leaving no space for hesitation. This is not an invitation to contemplate, it is an imperative to move, to act. Those caught in the inertia of old routines may find stillness indistinguishable from stagnation, as if sleepwalking through a moment demanding full participation. Can stillness sometimes be another word for hiding from what wants to break through? Now comes the time when the moon strips away the old and makes room for the untried. Wishes and visualizations once clung to now seem empty. Rituals that used to provide comfort suddenly fall away, revealing the space beneath. It is not that desires or plans have failed, it is that the self who made them has transformed. What remains is a kind of clarity, a purposeful blankness that clears the stage for what's next. How often do people mistake this clearing for apathy, rather than a necessary purification? This lunar phase turns the usual inquiry inside out. Instead of chasing after desires, the focus shifts to what's faded from reality, what can no longer hold weight in the landscape of the present. Silence tonight isn't a vacuum but a heightened presence, a subtle anticipation filling the room, the kind that's almost tangible yet impossible to describe. The sense of waiting hangs thickly, as if the air expects something to be noticed rather than announced. While many may fill this charged space with habits or background noise, a quiet pull remains beneath it all, inviting reflection rather than distraction. Isn't it odd how stillness can sometimes feel fuller than any sound? What's happening now is not about overwhelming with new information, but about amplifying the traces already woven through everyday life. This isn't silence meant to shut things down, it's a dynamic, humming awareness, a sort of undercurrent carrying signals that were always present but only now become perceptible. The atmosphere feels denser, not colder or darker, but charged with layers that seem to hum with recognition. Anyone pausing long enough to notice might sense the room itself growing attentive, as if the very air holds secrets trying to make contact. Have you ever felt silence so vibrant that it almost seems to reach out? This period is less about inactivity and more about observation, about how existence unfolds in the absence of overt guidance. Rather than a lull, there's an invitation to notice what rises from the quiet. The boundaries between seen and unseen feel thinner, almost translucent. Actions, thoughts, and memories echo in ways they haven't before, reverberating across unseen dimensions. It isn't confusion, it's the unmistakable experience of something reaching back, of being mirrored in a space that's suddenly listening intently. Ever had the sense that clarity intensifies when everything else slows down? So if a sense of strangeness arrives tonight, let it linger. If the silence feels almost alive, believe it. If an inexplicable movement occurs in the stillness, resist the urge to categorize or control it. Some nights are not for explanation but for memory, etched not in logic, but in sensation. The lunar invitation tonight is wordless. It asks for no action, only for the realization that presence itself is enough. Is it possible that what's most real sometimes reveals itself only when the world stops demanding answers?